Hey everyone, Frank from Old Town Coleman. Welcome to part 3 of my 3-part series on how to rebuild a Coleman single-mantle lantern. This is the reassembly phase. In the box here I have a clean single-mantle 200A lantern ready to go back together. So grab a cup of coffee, relax, and we'll be right back and start putting it together. So when I'm rebuilding a lantern, I usually like to begin with the valve, and that starts with the valve stem. So that's where we'll begin now. First of all, I'd like to show you the valve stem packing retainer. I want to give you a nice close-up view of it. This little ring has a flat side, which is that side there, and then this side is beveled on the inside. I don't know if you can see that little bevel in it. But that little bevel is there for a reason, and what it does, it rests up against the retainer stop, and that is so when you open up your valve stem all the way, it will lock. So we have to make sure that we put that on in the right direction. This is the valve stem for the 200A, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the beveled side on first. And you can see I press it up against the little lock there, and it will stop it. You can't pull it out anymore. The next thing that would go on is the new valve stem packing, small graphite packing. And after that, simply put on the valve stem nut. And that is how the valve stem goes back together on our 200A. The big difference with the 242 valve stem is that the valve wheel does not come off. So that means that we have to take everything off the end of the valve. And in order to do that, we have to take on the valve stem retainer stop, which is this little C-clip. That has to come off first, and then we can pull off the packing retainer and the valve stem nut. I've not cleaned this valve stem, and therefore the valve stem packing is still inside of there. So to put this valve stem back together, all we would do is place this on first, then we would put the packing retainer on with the flat side against the packing itself, and that will ensure that the beveled side will go up against the stop, just like it did on our 200A valve. Now I'm going to take the retainer stop and I'm going to put it back on. I had to open this up with a small screwdriver and just pry the edges out. Try not to bend it too far. Be very gentle with it. It's going to be difficult to get off and back on, but you don't want to make it too much out of round, because what we're going to do now is take a pair of needle nose pliers and we're going to crimp it back onto that groove in the valve stem. Just like that. And we're going to get it to close as much as we possibly can. So now that stop will stop the retainer from going any further, and that's the way it's supposed to be. We will test this here in a few minutes. So that's the 242 valve stem. Now what we'll do is we will put the valve back together for our 200A. And all I'm going to do is insert the valve stem into the end of the valve and get it so she's tight. Then I'm going to take the valve stem nut and I'm going to put it on with my fingers as far as I can. This is about that far. The next thing I'm going to do is the fuel and air tube. Now when we were cleaning this, we soaked this in vinegar, which is going to clean the inside of it well, but we need to make sure that it is clean now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray this with carburetor cleaner, and then I'm going to plunge it out with the metering rod just to make sure that we have no varnish or carbon built up inside of it. So just a quick squirt on either end. Make sure it's full of cleaner. And then I'm going to take the metering rod and I'm going to insert it into the little hole at the bottom. Just like that, and I'm just going to plunge it out a few times. Then I'm going to take my air compressor and blow it out. Okay. So now that I've cleaned out my fuel and air tube, what we're going to do is assemble it. The spring that goes in the fuel and air tube, over a period of 40, 50 years, while sitting in the lantern, is going to be compressed. So all you need to do is just stretch it just a little bit, make it a little bit longer. Put it over your metering rod, like such, and then just insert it into the top of your fuel and air tube, just like that. And make sure that it goes down and comes back up without binding. You can see the metering rod coming out the bottom of your fuel and air tube. Then I'm going to just simply insert it in the bottom of the valve assembly and get it finger tight. Take a 5/16 wrench and snug it up. Okay, the next thing we need to do is tighten the valve stem nut. What we're actually doing is we're compressing that new packing we just put in there. Tightening the nut will compress it around the valve stem itself. And the way we do that, we just put it back in our bench vise, tighten it up a little bit. We're going to take our valve wheel and a 1/2-inch wrench. And right now, you can see this is really easy to open and to close. There is no resistance whatsoever. What we want to do is tighten this down until it gives us enough resistance that we know it's tight. So I'm going to turn this about a turn and check it again. No, it's still very loose. Another turn, very, very loose. One more turn, still loose. There we go. Now we got some pressure. Takes a little bit of force to open it now and a little bit to close it. You can definitely feel some drag on it, and that tells you that it is now compressed around it. So that feels real good right there. So that is how we establish tension for our valve stem packing nut, or our valve stem nut. And we are ready to install our valve in the lantern now. Okay, this is a very important part when we're putting back together your 242. If you took apart the valve stem, what we're going to do now is test to make sure that the valve stem retaining stop is working properly. I recommend you do this for 200 days too, although you don't take off that retainer stop. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the valve all the way, and I want to make sure that it actually stops. And I'm going to give it a little bit of pressure to try to break it free. You can see that I cannot. That's the way it's supposed to work. That means that little C-clip is properly wrapped around the valve stem, and that it is, because the retainer has the beveled part forward, it is locking down on that C-clip and it won't open. So this will bring us to a discussion on thread sealer and thread locker. If you notice on the top of the fount, you can see there is a burgundy looking material there. That is the material that Coleman used when they put this lantern together, and that is called gasoil, hard set. I have rebuilt hundreds of lamps and lanterns, and I have yet to use any thread locker in anything I've ever done. Some people swear by it. All I can tell you is you do not want to use pipe dope, and you do not want to use any sort of Teflon tape. They give you a false reading on tension, and you may over tension it and break your threads. You don't want to do that. If you want to use a thread locker, I recommend you use Loctite red number 262 or 545, I believe it is. Those two are a permanent. They will make it difficult to get your valve back out, but if you feel the need to use those are the two types that you would want to use. Again, I have never used it, and I won't use it in here. I'm just going to put it back in, and I'm going to spin it around, and it's going to start getting really hard to move once I start getting to close to where I want it to end. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place it back in the bench vise upside down, and I'm going to continue turning this until the valve stem is centered halfway between the pump and the filler cap. On a US-made 200 lantern, this will always be with the pump on the right and the filler cap on the left. If you have a very early 242 or 240A lantern, 242A lantern, you would want to reverse that. Your valve stem would come here with the pump on the left and the filler cap on the right. If it's a Canadian-built 200A or 200, it would also be with the pump on the left and the filler cap on the right. But since this one was made in the US, I'm going to go to the bench vise and I'm going to turn it slowly until I get the clocking where I want it. Just a little bit more. One more time. Okay, she's awful close to being centered. Please disregard the decal. Sometimes they're a little bit off. So there is our proper clocking. Next thing we're going to do is insert the check valve. Now, if you were to buy a brand new check valve from Coleman, you're going to end up getting this device, and you can see that it has a gasket. Well, the original one that was in this lantern, which is what I'm going to use today, did not have that gasket. That gasket's a good idea. So if you go to my website at oldtowncoleman.com under Rebuild Single-Mantle Lanterns, you'll be able to find the size of this little gasket, this little O-ring that I bought at a hardware store. All you would do is put it on the old check valve and roll it up, and there you are. So I'm going to drop the check valve down into the pump cylinder and make sure it's sitting in there properly. Then I'm going to take a nice large flathead screwdriver and set her down in there and just start turning it. I don't want to tighten it, I just want to snug it. Like that. The next part I would put in is the air stem, and all I do is place that down inside the check valve and turn it, and I can leave that finger tight. The next thing we're going to put in is the pump. Now the pump, we soaked it in oil, and what we want to make sure is that we have all of the oil, excess oil, taken out of this. So blow it through the top with compressed air if you can, or shake it out and make sure that there is no oil inside, and any excess oil that is on the pump cup that you dry off. All that excess oil will go down into your check valve and it'll stop it from sealing. So what we're going to do now is we are going to insert the air stem into the little hole in the end of the pump shaft. And then we're going to tuck the pump cup into the pump housing so it doesn't roll back on us when we push it down. I want to make sure that it's all inside, just like that. Push it down. The next comes the pump cap. If your pump cap has an oil hole on that, make sure it goes on the upper half, and you just set that down nice and gently on your fount. You should have cleaned this really well when you were cleaning it, but we're going to set it down on there, and then I'm going to make sure that my holes in the fount are aligned with the holes in the pump cap. If you have an older lantern, you're going to have two screws, top and bottom. You can insert them now, or you may have a pump clip like this. Sometimes these pump clips can be really difficult to put on. What you can do is pull out of it with your fingers, and if you can get it to click like that, that's good. You may have to use a pair of needle nose pliers to pull it apart a little further and set it up so it doesn't fall off and scratch your fount. But there's our pump. Next we'll be reassembling the fuel filler cap. And I'm taking my 3-piece cap, and this is our insert with the new gasket in it. I'm just going to set it down there. I'm going to place the cap over it and loosely install it, and then I'm going to put the screw in there and get that started inside of the insert. Once I have it started, Then I will tighten the cap down real well and turn it in there and tighten it up. Now you'll notice that there is a space between the top of the fuel cap, or top of the filler cap, and the bottom of the screw, and that is supposed to be there. Okay, so there's our lantern put back together, the Fount portion of it anyway. What I'm going to do now is take it outside and fill it about halfway full of fuel, and then we'll come back in and pressure test it. Be right back. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes. I don't see any dampness around my fuel valve. I don't see or feel any dampness under my valve stem nut. And I see no ring of fuel here, and I don't feel anything down here. So at least so far, we know that we have a nicely sealed Fount. Okay, next thing we're going to do is put on the frame rest. Now this is, if you have a very nice Fount with paint that you don't want to scratch, you have to be careful how you put this on, and it is the exact opposite of what we did to take it off. I'm going to turn the tip cleaner sideways so I can insert the back of the valve, the frame rest in it, and I'm going to press it forward, and then when it gets to this point, you gently squeeze till it goes over the end of the valve stem nut, and there it is, setting down just like that. Next, we will take our frame washers and install those. Again, if you've lost these, you can go to my website and it will give you the sizes of them, but I'm going to set them on there right now. Okay, before we move on, you'll remember that we did a check valve test. I showed you the 3 lanterns, what the check valve may do. Because this pump did not work when we took it apart, I still am not sure if this check valve works. So it's overpressurized right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the check valve, and I'm going to rest my finger on the end of the pump. And it does not move, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. Again, if it came up real slow like that, yeah, that's probably something you could deal with, because by turning this clockwise, it is a positive stop in there and it is sealing the check valve. If it was to come up real fast like that, that's way too much, and you'd have to remove and or replace the check valve. Okay, so now we have our frame washers on, we're ready to continue. The next thing I want to put on is the generator. Now you take your new generator, and you do not want to lose the parts that are inside. We have a stem inside and a spring and a small piece of cardboard. We don't want to lose any of these, so be careful when you take the end off. What you want to do is take your jam nut and put it over the end of your generator, and then you'll notice that there's a hook on that right here at the end of your tip cleaner stem, or your tip cleaner rod, I'm sorry. And you want to insert that into the end of your eccentric block on your valve. So what I'm going to do is try to do it for the camera. I've just inserted it like that. And what I want to do is I'm going to turn my tip cleaner down, and that locks it in place. I can't get it out now. And I'm very gently going to lower the generator tube down onto the valve, because there is a very small needle up here. It is the tip cleaner. It's what actually pokes the gas tip, and it is easily bent. So we want to be very careful when we do that. And then I'm just going to, for now, this is going to be finger tight. Next thing we will do is we have to reassemble the frame. Okay, during cleaning, you may or may not have soaked your frame in vinegar. If you didn't, or even if you did, what you want to do, this is the air intake tube on a 200A. It pulls fresh air from the bottom, and it pulls it up, and then it provides it for the burner. This is where spiders will get into, and it will clog it up. So although it may have been soaked or it may not have been soaked, what you want to do is you want to take a small brush, and you just want to go up there and try to plunge it out. Go from the top, go from the bottom, take compressed air and blow it out. If you have a 242, Both of these are your air intake tubes, and you can see the passage right there into the burner. You also want to clean them out, just like that. Get all the spiders out through here, and then again, blow it all out with compressed air. So we can put the 242 aside, back to our 200A frame. Now that it's all cleaned out, inside and out, now we can put it back together. So we're going to take our ventilator hanger and we're going to place it into the middle of the frame like such. We're going to take our venturi and we are going to insert it into the air intake tube top. And then we're going to take our U-tube. If you look down in there, you'll see that one side is threaded and the other side is not. So we are going to take our threaded side and we are going to put that into the middle like such and set her down there. Get that back in there. Okay, just like that. Now we're going to take our burner tube and we're going to insert this up from the bottom and into the U-tube. And should thread right in. Okay, square everything up real nice. And now there's that 5/8 inch nut at the bottom of the burner tube. And we're just going to snug it back in. Nice and tight, not going anywhere now. And there's our frame, ready to go back on our lantern. So now we're going to gently put this back down like this, and you need to make sure that the tip of your generator goes in that little hole in the air intake tube or the little hole in your frame burner on a 242 style lantern, and just set it down like that. You can see how it went in there. Okay, I'm taking my frame nut. This is a Powell nut on this style of lantern, and I will put it on finger tight. Now, before I tighten it, I need to make sure that my frame rest is setting properly around my valve stem nut. You can see that there should be equal space all the way around it. If it's off center, it will not look right. So you want to make sure that everything's right and all lined up. And once you've done that, take your 7/16 wrench and go ahead and tighten it. And just tighten it until the point where it would take a little excessive force to get it to turn. Right now it's pretty easy to turn, so it's not quite tight enough. Those two washers are going to take all the pressure, so you should not be bending the frame rest now. There you go. That's nice and tight. Okay, looks good. Now, this we put on finger tight. Now we want to tighten it. The reason I didn't tighten it before is there has to be a little bit of movement for when you insert it into the air intake. So I'm going to snug it up so it doesn't leak, and there it is. Next thing we're going to put on is the valve wheel. So we put that on there. Make sure that the valve is fully closed, fully clockwise. And then we're going to take our direction disc and just set it in there like such. And then take our screw and place it in there. Get it started. And take a screwdriver and tighten it up a little bit. And what you want to do is you want to line that and put the arrow straight in the air like such, and then tighten it up like that. Okay, there that is. She is all put back together and we are ready to do a test fire. So first thing we're going to do is take our mantle, brand new mantle, and I'm going to tie 1/2 of a knot in it. I'm going to stick my finger back in it to open it up just a little bit. Then you can see the grooves in the burner cap. That is where your string lies. Just like such. Okay, now I'm going to tie the second knot. When we burn the lantern, if you leave these on, they are going to curl and they are going to poke your mantle. So you need to clip them off. Okay, and when you're done, you want to put the flat side up against the generator, like such. Okay, now we can take a match and we're going to burn the mantle. You want to make sure you burn the entire mantle. Don't touch it while it's burning and allow it to cool before we do anything else. Okay, we'll just let it sit here for a few minutes and cool down, and then we'll give her a shot at lighting it. Okay, now our mantle is cool, and it's also very fragile, so now we don't want to touch it. The next thing we're going to do is open the valve and ensure that we actually have fuel coming out our gas tip. And the way we do that is I'm going to give this about a half a turn, maybe 3/4 of a turn, and what I expect to hear at first is air hissing out the top of the generator. Within 10 seconds or so, I should hear that turn into a spitting noise, and that would be the introduction of gasoline up to the top of the generator, which is what we want. If we have that, I'm pretty sure it'll light. So what I'm going to do is get real close here so you can hear it and see what we have. There's the spitting. Okay, now I want to shut it off. Okay, that tells me that I have gas now going down to my mantle. So we can light this. I'm going to take a match and light it, and then I'm going to set it under the mantle, and then I'm going to crack the valve about 1/4 turn and watch her light. Okay, you can see it's burning yellow and it's sputtering a little bit. That's because the generator's not hot yet. The generator generates fuel vapor, and it can't do that until it actually gets hot. So I just have my valve stem turned just that much, and it's burning pretty well. Now what I'm going to do, now that it's nice and steady and a little bit brighter, I'm going to slowly open my valve. All the way up. Looking real good. I'm going to give it a few more pumps to increase the brightness. Got the slightest bit of flicker, but she's burning real nice. So now to finish it up, I'm going to take the globe, and I'm going to set it down. I'll take the ventilator, set it on the lantern, take my bale, set it on the lantern, and I'm going to take my walnut, and I'm not going to tighten my ball nut down. I want to just until it touches the ventilator. What happens is people will tighten that down, and then as the ventilator gets hot and expands, it will put cracks, usually like 4 little cracks, missing pieces of porcelain on top of your ventilator. So that's what it looked like. She's burning real good. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Full rebuild instructions can be found at oldtowncoleman.com in the Learning Center. Again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep them burning.